Shabbat Shalom Yasharallah. Welcome to Torah Portion, Part 23. We will be covering Leviticus 11 all the way through Leviticus 15. Before we get started, let's start with a prayer before we begin. Heavenly Abba, high in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thank you for allowing us to be here in your presence, Abba. Please humble us in these times. I know each and every one of us is feeling the tension from the world, and even within the Torah community, it just feels like it's getting more and more intense. We ask for you to protect us during these times and to keep us on your righteous path, to not let us to veer to the left or to the right, but stay narrow, for that is the way. And we ask for you to fill us with the Ruach, give us the discernment and the wisdom to do so, because we know we are nothing without you, and we need you. So we're calling upon you to give us rest on this day, in all our days, in mercy, and in the blessings of our Mashiach, Yeshaya. Amen. All right, week 23. I have the animals. This Torah portion is about the clean and the unclean, and how to make oneself clean if you do become unclean. Or obviously, as we see the animals here, what not to eat that is unclean. Now, before I get started on Leviticus 11, I want to let everybody know that if you want more insight, I'm not going to do a crazy in-depth food law study, because I have that already done separately. It's simply titled Food Law in my YouTube if you want more insight on Leviticus 11. All right. That being said, let's get started. Leviticus 11, we're going to start off reading verses 1 through 8, and we'll break it down piece by piece.
Leviticus 11. And the Lord spake unto Moses and to Aaron, saying unto them, Speak unto the children of Israel, saying, These are the beasts which ye shall eat among all the beasts that are on the earth. Whatsoever parteth the hoof, and is cloven-footed, and cheweth the cud, among the beasts, that shall ye eat. Nevertheless, these shall ye not eat of them that chew the cud, or of them that divide the hoof. As the camel, because he cheweth the cud, but divided not the hoof, he is unclean unto you. And the coney, because he cheweth the cud, but divideth not the hoof, he is unclean unto you. And the hare, because he cheweth the cud, but divideth not the hoof, he is unclean unto you. And the swine, though he divide the hoof, and be cloven-footed, yet he cheweth not the cud, he is unclean to you. Of their flesh shall ye not eat, and their carcass shall ye not touch. They are unclean to you.
All right. Let's go to the Targums for verse 3. Let me see. One second. All right, verse 3, whoever parteth the hoof and is cloven-footed and cheweth the cud among the beasts, that shall ye eat. And the Targums add one more description in verse 3. And we see right here, we have the hoof, the cloven-footed, and then that which has horns, bringing up the cud among the beasts that you may eat. And I would say that all the animals do have a form of horns that are the land animals that we are talking about right now. So this looks like it is valid when you go and break down the animals that are clean based off of all of these characteristics. The ones that are left do have horns. So let's go over them. So Cloven foot, this is what it's implying. So split. And then the mule foot hooves are, mules, donkeys, and horses. All right, so that is the difference. Or even here, so as long as they have a split in the middle, that is cloven feet. And that is one of the part of the hoof and is cloven footed. So that's one of the characteristics of a clean animal. But the clean animal has to have all of these characteristics that's in verse 3. A cloven foot, so not a hoof that is together, but is cloven foot that has a separation. Okay, it has to have that. That's step 1. And then just separating the two, showing some examples that we see a pig can have cloven foot. But we know pigs aren't clean. And this is why you have to make sure it checks all the boxes. That is in verse 3. Because pigs, and we just see that goats has that split, cows, and camels. But not all are clean, obviously. So that's kind of the point, is to show you that there is clean and unclean animals that have split feet that are cloven. Doesn't mean they are clean on that alone. All right, so the next thing was cheweth the cud. So what exactly is that? I didn't know. I mean, if you don't grow up on a farm and have this terminology, how will you know? So let's go into it and look into it. All right, chew the cud. Further chew partly digested food. And this is just from the Blue Letter Bible, Strong's definition. As scraping the throat, it like regurgitates it and chews it again. Like it pulls it up, the food back up the throat, and partly chews, further chew partly digested food. So that is chewing the cud. And then furthermore, what is an example of cud? Cud is a portion of food that returns from an animal's stomach to the mouth to be chewed for a second time. So we see why it says as scraping the throat, because where else is how it's going to come up? It's going to come up by scraping the throat back up to the mouth to chew it down again. Cud is produced during a digestive process called rumination. And then we see all of these: cattle, deer, sheep, goats, antelope. These are all clean animals that chew the cud. And these animals, ruminant, is a mammal that eats and digests plant-based food such as grass. So these mammals are usually associated, these ruminants are mostly clean animals, I would say. Don't want to say 100%, but I believe all of these that are under this category are clean animals. And so as long as they have all of these characteristics, the cloven hooves, it chews the cud, and like the Targums also say horns, which like cows, goats, lambs, all are a family that has horns. This makes a clean animal. So verses 1 through 8, this is your clean land animals and unclean land animals based on what we just read. And like I said, I'm not going over all the crazy details, even though I did go over most of the details. I'm just saying it's even more so in the food law study. And as a second witness, we're going to read the Targum translation in Deuteronomy 14. That is our precept within the Torah. If you do not know, the precept for Leviticus 11 is Deuteronomy 14. The Torah gives its own witness, and it explains it in a little different manner as well. So we see Deuteronomy 14. We're going to read verses 3 and 6 before we close off this section of land animals that are clean and unclean. You may not eat anything that for you is abominable. These are the animals that you may eat: oxen and lambs and ewes, such as are not blemished or unclean. Kids of the goats unmixed with what are unclean. Hares, antelope, fallow deer, rock goats, and reams, wild oxen, and whatever that is. So just another witness. Oh, is it verse 6? And verse 6. And every animal that has the divided hoof and horns, and that cleaveth the cliff, bring it up the cud among animals that you may eat. And that is our land animals. We're moving on to the sea creatures, 9 through 12.
These shall ye eat of all that are in the waters. Whatsoever hath fins and scales in the waters, in the seas, and in the rivers, them shall ye eat. And all that have not fins and scales in the seas and in the rivers, of all that move in the waters, and of any living thing which is in the waters, they shall be an abomination unto you. They shall be even an abomination unto you. Ye shall not eat of their flesh, but ye shall have their carcasses in abomination. Whatsoever hath no fins nor scales in the waters, that shall be an abomination unto you.
All right, so this was more straightforward. Simply put it, in these fins and scales, or you don't eat it, both of them. So before, we're going to read Deuteronomy first. I actually should have read Deuteronomy first before we went over to the slides. So we're going to go to Deuteronomy 14, verse 9 and 10. But this you may eat of all that are in the waters, whatever has fins to move as by flying, and scales upon its skin, and though some of which may fall away, yet if there remain on under its jaw, another under its fin, and another under its tail, that you may eat. But whatever has neither fins nor scales, so need both of them, you may not eat. It is unclean to you. So a little description there. Take it what you will if you are, especially a fisherman. As long as there's fins and at least a few scales on the body, throughout the body here and there, as stated in verse 9, is good to eat. And that is kind of important when you go to tuna fish, because tuna fish is, not all tuna fish are made the same. Some tuna fish don't have scales at all, and others do have scales. And some of the ones that do have scales doesn't have a lot of scales. So this description may help with that category. All right, now to the slides. Clean or unclean? Scales and fins. Only criteria. So that being said, that gives us the clean fish. All of these clean fish have scales and fins. And then you see right here, I have in red, tuna. Limited species within tuna have both. Not all tuna fish have scales, but everything else here has fins and scales. And then obviously we have everything that's the opposite, such as the mammals of the sea, whales, because they have fins, but they don't have scales. Whales and seals and walrus and dolphins. And then we have the soft body fish, such as jellyfish, octopus, shellfish, and then just fish that don't have both. All right, moving on. Land animals, check. Sea creatures, check. Now we are on the fowls of the air, or just birds, and it's not, birds, I guess you could say. So we're reading verses 13 through 19.
And these are they which ye shall have in abomination among the fowls. They shall not be eaten. They are an abomination, the eagle, and the ossifrage, and the osprey, and the vulture, and the kite after his kind, every raven after his kind, and the owl, and the nighthawk, and the cuckoo, and the hawk after his kind, and the little owl, and the cormorant, and the great owl, and the swan, and the pelican, and the gyre eagle, and the stork, the heron after her kind, and the lapwing, and the bat. All fowls that creep, going upon all four, shall be an abomination to you.
Oh. Oops.
The heron after her kind, and the lapwing, and the bat.
All right. That was verses 13 through 19. All right. So that is the fowls of the air. Let's get a precept in Deuteronomy. And we see we're going to read verses 11. I went too far down. 11 through 18. Every bird which has a vesicle, excuse me if I'm pronouncing it wrong, or a crop. We went over this in an earlier Torah portion of these crops, which may be picked away, in which bird is longer than a finger. So I guess not a tiny bird. So the Targums in the Deuteronomy 14 gives a slightly more enhanced description. And this is really important for the birds because in the Masoretic, they don't really give us much descriptions of, it gives us a list of birds that are clean and unclean, but it doesn't give us much description of what is clean and unclean in the bird category. All right, so, and then it goes on to say not a rapacious kind. So this means a predator that hunts for a living, not a bird that will eat an insect like a chicken or whatever, or even a mouse, because it's an opportunist and it'll eat it. We're talking about birds that literally hunt for a living, like eagles and vultures. They hunt for a living. They don't consume other stuff and say, I don't need meat. That they hunt for meat for a living. You may eat. So that's the criteria according to the Targums for a clean bird. It has a crop to be plucked away. It's longer than a finger, and it is not a bird of prey. Continuing now in verse 12. But these are they which you may not eat. And not going to read all of these. Like I said, if you want to go into that detail, this is just repeating some of the birds. Once again, the raven, the owl. These are examples of birds of prey, or doesn't have a crop, and so on. And let's see. So yeah, just leave it at that. So that's the main reason we went here. Verse 11 gives us criteria of these birds that are unclean. All right. That being said, like I said, they don't give us any much more description than that. So we go straight to the food, and which is food, the clean birds, and that is not food, the unclean. So every single one of these birds are longer than a finger, has a crop, and is not a bird of prey as listed at the bottom here. And any other bird or fowl is listed to the right for unclean. All right, so now we are in the insects category. And I've said this during the food law study, but this is very important to make sure we're reading in context, because verse 20 starts the flying insects like grasshoppers that goes upon that fowls that creep going on all four. And we even see over here in the ESV translation to the right in verse 20, all winged insects That is a kind of a better description than this. All fowls that creep, that could be misleading. All winged insects. And somebody tried to use this verse for actual birds. And this is why you got to read in context. This is talking about insects, not actual birds. All right. With that being said, let's go and read verse 20 through 23 for what insects we can eat, because there is a few of them.
All fowls that creep, going upon all four, shall be an abomination to you. Yet these may ye eat of every flying creeping thing that goeth upon all four, which have legs above their feet, to leap withal upon the earth. Even these of them ye may eat: the locust after his kind, and the bald locust after his kind, and the beetle after his kind, and the grasshopper after his kind. But all other flying creeping things which have 4 feet shall be an abomination unto you.
All right. So these are the flying insects. So the only criteria it gives in verse 21, yet these may ye eat of every flying creepy thing that goes upon all four, which has legs above their feet, to leap withal upon the earth. And one last precept in Deuteronomy 14:19 in the Targums. This gives more description as well. And all flies, bees, wasps, and all worms, vegetables, and posts which come away from minerals of food and fly as birds are unclean to you. They may not be eaten. Is that the only thing? Let's see. But any clean beast, locust, you may eat. And yeah, that's the added information that is in Deuteronomy 14 there. And one last picture. Very short list for clean flying insects: locusts, crickets, and grasshoppers. And I mean, a couple of more that were questionable, but I wasn't 100% sure, so I left it to the very straightforward, for sure, clean insects, which are these 3. And we know John the Baptist, his main diet was locusts. All right, let's read the rest of the chapter now, 24 through 47.
And for these ye shall be unclean. Whosoever toucheth the carcass of them shall be unclean until the even. And whosoever beareth aught of the carcass of them shall wash his clothes, and be unclean until the even. The carcasses of every beast which divideth the hoof, and is not cloven-footed, nor cheweth the cud, are unclean unto you. Every one that toucheth them shall be unclean. And whatsoever goeth upon his paws among all manner of beasts that go on all four, those are unclean unto you. Whoso toucheth their carcass shall be unclean until the even. And he that beareth the carcass of them shall wash his clothes, and be unclean until the even. They are unclean unto you. These also shall be unclean unto you among the creeping things that creep upon the earth: the weasel, and the mouse, and the tortoise after his kind, and the ferret, and the chameleon, and the lizard, and the snail, and the mole. These are unclean to you among all that creep. Whosoever doth touch them, when they be dead, shall be unclean until the even. And upon whatsoever any of them, when they are dead, doth fall, it shall be unclean, whether it be any vessel of wood, or raiment, or skin, or sack, whatsoever vessel it be, wherein any work is done, it must be put into water, and it shall be unclean until the even. So it shall be cleansed. And every earthen vessel, whereinto any of them falleth, whatsoever is in it shall be unclean. and ye shall break it. Of all meat which may be eaten, that on which such water cometh shall be unclean, and all drink that may be drunk in every such vessel shall be unclean. And everything whereupon any part of their carcass falleth shall be unclean, whether it be oven, or ranges, or pots, they shall be broken down, for they are unclean, and shall be unclean unto you. Nevertheless, a fountain or pit wherein there is plenty of water shall be clean, but that which toucheth their carcass shall be unclean. And if any part of their carcass fall upon any sowing seed which is to be sown, it shall be clean. But if any water be put upon the seed, and any part of their carcass fall thereon, it shall be unclean unto you. And if any beast of which ye may eat die, he that toucheth the carcass thereof shall be unclean until the even. And he that eateth of the carcass of it shall wash his clothes, and be unclean until the even. He also that beareth the carcass of it shall wash his clothes, and be unclean until the even. And every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth shall be an abomination, it shall not be eaten. Whatsoever goeth upon the belly, and whatsoever goeth upon all four, or whatsoever hath more feet among all creeping things that creep upon the earth, them ye shall not eat, for they are an abomination. Ye shall not make yourselves abominable with any creeping thing that creepeth, neither shall ye make yourselves unclean with them, that ye should be defiled thereby. For I am the Lord your God. Ye shall therefore sanctify yourselves, and ye shall be holy, for I am holy. Neither shall ye defile yourselves with any manner of creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth. For I am the Lord that bringeth you up out of the land of Egypt, to be your God. Ye shall therefore be holy, for I am holy. This is the law of the beasts, and of the fowl, and of every living creature that moveth in the waters, and of every creature that creepeth upon the earth, to make a difference between the unclean and the clean, and between the beast that may be eaten and the beast that may not be eaten.
All right. Couple of verses we're going to compare in the Targum. Verse 29. These also shall be unclean unto you among the creepy things that creep upon the earth. Let's see what the difference is. Verse 29. Oh, I think it just reads completely different. Let's read. And these also to you are such as defile the blood, the skin, and the flesh of every reptile that creepeth upon the ground, the weasel, the mouse, black, red, and white, and the toad after his kind. So, like I said, just a different description of unclean animals. And in verse 42, and whatever goeth upon its belly, and whatever animal crawleth upon from the serpent unto the caterpillar, which has many feet. Of my reptile that creepeth upon the ground, you may not eat. That's the word they use for insects here. So insects that creepeth upon the ground, you may not eat, for they are an abomination. So this verse was just adding an actual insect to this description in 42. Or whatsoever has more feet among all creepy things that creep upon the earth. And they actually say caterpillar here. But all the rest that we just read through from verse 24 to 47, in a nutshell, is saying that anything, if you touch a dead animal, if you touch a dead corpse animal, unclean dead animal, you are unclean and your clothes are unclean until evening. Bathe, wash yourself with water, clean your clothes. And then it goes on, it talks about your dishes, your pots. Let me see, where is that at? Vessels, here we go. Talks about your vessels that you use for cooking. whether it be any vessel of wood or raiment or skin or sack, whatsoever vessel it be wherein any work is done, it must be put into water, and it shall be unclean until evening. So literally anything from your clothes to the vessels of pots, pans, dishes, to yourself is all clean. I mean, all unclean if it touches an animal or a corpse that is unclean. And let me see. So so that's just the gist of it. In general, you obviously, I mean, I guess the only case for us, since we shouldn't be bringing in unclean food into our house, and you want to be cooking with it, so it shouldn't affect you much. I guess the one thing that if you do find something unclean, just make sure, if you did use it, make sure not to use that dish until evening. Okay. And also, if you do, like, let's say my dog dies, or one of my cat, whatever, any type of regular pets we have in modern day times that is unclean, got to make sure that that stuff is not touching your, like, if I have to carry an animal that is unclean and dead out of my house, I can't go touch stuff all in the kitchen until evening, because what I touch will make everything unclean. Hope that makes sense, but that's just the gist of what Leviticus 11 is relaying in the remainder of the chapter. And I don't think it's a big deal to have them as pets, Liz. This is focusing on them being dead. That's why I made the example of if one of your pets did die that are unclean, which most of our pets are unclean animals, then, like it says right here, they are unclean. Whoever does touch them when they be dead shall be unclean until evening. It doesn't say you can't like touch an animal that at all. I don't think, unless you have a verse that you want to show me, I don't think that's what it says at all. So if you have pet dog, a pet cat, I don't think that matters. Unless, like I said, show me the verse if you have a question on a verse. Yeah, very good point, Derek. If you do have a pet and you don't want to become unclean, and you're able to get a shovel and shovel them out, then yeah, technically your hands are not touching them. I feel like that is exactly what you should do if you're in a situation where you're like, wow, this is not a good time to touch a dead animal. Let me go get a shovel or something so I don't have to put my hands upon the animal. So yeah, I mean, think around it. Gloves, you just got to be real careful with gloves, because I mean, if it touches any part of your skin, you're still unclean. It's not just your hands. So if it touches you, you just got to make sure that because you grab it with your hands, if that fur or feathers or whatever touches you, you're unclean. A shovel kind of like creates a space so you for sure won't be able to touch that. Maybe long sleeves with gloves will be the safest way if you don't have a shovel. But problem solve, think about it. But by the end of this Torah portion, at the end of verse 15, I'm going to give like a summary over just modern day times dealing with clean and unclean aspects of what we're reading about throughout this Torah portion. And that is Leviticus 11, your food law. Leviticus 12 is only 8 verses. childbirth requirements and purification. Let the whole chapter read, 1 through 8.
Leviticus 12. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, saying, If a woman have conceived seed and born a man-child, then she shall be unclean 7 days, according to the days of the separation for her infirmity shall she be unclean. And in the 8th day the flesh of his foreskin shall be circumcised, and she shall then continue in the blood of her purifying 33 days. She shall touch no hallowed thing, nor come into the sanctuary until the days of her purifying be fulfilled. And if she bear a maid child, then she shall be unclean 2 weeks, as in her separation, and she shall continue in the blood of her purifying 66 days. And when the days of her purifying are fulfilled, for a son or for a daughter, she shall bring a lamb of the first year for a burnt offering, and a young pigeon, or a turtle dove, for a sin offering, unto the door of the tabernacle of the congregation, unto the priest, who shall offer it before the Lord, and make an atonement for her, and she shall be cleansed from the issue of her blood. This is the law for her that hath borne a male or a female. And if she be not able to bring a lamb, then she shall bring 2 turtles or 2 young pigeons, the one for the burnt offering and the other for a sin offering, and the priest shall make an atonement for her, and she shall be clean.
A lot of us will remember that this verse 8, if she is not able to bring a lamb, then she shall bring 2 turtle doves and 2 young pigeons. We see that in the story of Mary and Messiah. Matthew 1, 21 through 24. And she shall bring forth a son, and thou shalt call his name Yasha, for he shall save his people from their sins, or Yeshaya. Now all this was done, that it might be fulfilled, which was spoken by the Adon, by the prophet, saying, Behold, wait a minute. Yep, I got the wrong verse. I'm like reading, wait a minute. I'm like, this is not the actual verse. Excuse me. Typo, 1 second. Let's see. If you got the verse, let me know. Which verse is the 2 where Mary brings the 2 turtle doves? Let's see. Y'all got me? Luke 2:24. I appreciate it. My mistake. I don't know what I got. What I got picking that. So one says 20, so 22, let's say 22 to 24. Let's get it. And let me change this typo. So 1 second. All right. Here we go. And when the days of her purification according to the law of Moses, what we just read in Leviticus 12. And to offer a sacrifice according to that which is said in the law of the Adon, a pair of turtle doves and 2 young pigeons. So we see that that is what was sacrificed by Mary. And what does that tell us? That tells us that they did not have money like that. Because it says, if she is not able to bring a lamb. So that means Messiah's family was too poor to afford a lamb to give that as a sacrifice to our Creator. Very humble. Very, very humbling to understand that, right? They were a part of the people that I guess you would say that was on the wrong side of their finances during this time frame in history. Right. She gave birth to the lamb, right? She gave 2 turtle doves and 2 pigeons. She had a little part of the entire purification of birth. And then this, and just as a recap, we see Leviticus 5:7. And if he be not able to bring a lamb, then he shall bring for his trespass, which he has committed, 2 turtle doves and 2 young pigeons. That we see that this is from Leviticus 5 to Leviticus 12, that the 2 turtle doves and 2 pigeons has always been kind of a replacement for a lamb if someone was not able to afford the lamb. All right, well, and that is Leviticus 12. Now moving on to the longest chapter. This is 59 verses of the Torah portion. This is on leprosy, as we see right here. The laws of leprosy. Leprosy is a something that comes from upon your skin, or can be upon other things, that is garments and housing, which we'll see in different layers throughout these next few chapters. All right, so we're going to start off reading verses 1 through 30. So get your listening ears on and let's get it.
Leviticus 13. And the Lord spake unto Moses and Aaron, saying, when a man shall have in the skin of his flesh a rising, a scab, or a bright spot, and it be in the skin of his flesh like the plague of leprosy, then he shall be brought unto Aaron the priest, or unto one of his sons the priests. And the priest shall look on the plague in the skin of the flesh. And when the hair in the plague is turned to white, and the plague in sight be deeper than the skin of his flesh, it is a plague of leprosy.
All right, so this is what I'm going to do as we go through it. That's a highlight verse right there, verse 3. That is the criteria, the basic criteria of leprosy. When you have a scab, a bright spot, a swelling, any of that, if it has hair that is turned white and the plague is deeper than the skin, it's a plague of leprosy, which is an unclean boil. And we'll see by, I'll just tell you right now, and we'll put it all together. We'll see that in the Deuteronomy translation in chapter 15, it speaks of a form of leprosy or uncleanliness that comes from the skin is called gonorrhea in the Septuagint translation. We'll also see tumors. And so in other words, like, I guess in modern day time, because somebody's description of like turning white, we may not see that in our time. It seems like we're in a different time frame for some of this description. But then the other descriptions, such as boils, scabs, tumors, like I said, STDs, gonorrhea, those are kind of the cancer. Tumor is a form of cancer, of inflammation, bulging from the skin. I would say that is the closest thing in understanding of a modern day time to what is leprosy. Just throwing that out there so you can have an idea of moving forward. But we will hear descriptions that we probably really don't see anymore, for the most part at least. But, even though we're in different times, there's not wisdom to be had in the taking away from these chapters. So let's read. But right now, the basic form of leprosy, at least in their time, because like I said, we may not see white hairs coming from it. I've never personally seen nothing like that, but that still could be going on. Just may not be to my attention of white hairs coming from a scab. And that's deeper than the flesh is the basic criteria as of right now. And that is also, Derek, we'll get to that. This is all in this Torah portion. So let's continue. We're in verse 4.
And the priest shall look on him and pronounce him unclean. If the bright spot be white in the skin of his flesh, and in sight be not deeper than the skin, and the hair thereof be not turned white, then the priest shall shut up him that hath the plague 7 days.
Oh, and excuse me, and that is white, even though some other descriptions say can be reddish white or something else, but I forgot to say, leprosy is white for the most part in the skin. So white in the skin, deeper than the surface of the skin, and white hair.
And the priest shall look on him the 7th day, and behold, if the plague in his sight be at a stay, and the plague spread not in the skin, then the priest shall shut him up 7 days more. And the priest shall look on him again the 7th day, and behold, if the plague be somewhat dark, and the plague spread not in the skin, the priest shall pronounce him clean. It is but a scab. Then he shall wash his clothes, and be clean. But if the scab spread much abroad in the skin, after that he hath been seen of the priest for his cleansing, he shall be seen of the priest again. And if the priest see that, behold, the scab spreadeth in the skin, then the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is a leprosy. When the plague of leprosy is in a man, then he shall be brought unto the priest. And the priest shall see him, and behold, if the rising be white in the skin, and it have turned the hair white, and there be quick raw flesh in the rising, it is an old leprosy in the skin of his flesh. And the priest shall pronounce him unclean, and shall not shut him up, for he is unclean. And if a leprosy break out abroad in the skin, and the leprosy cover all the skin of him that hath the plague from his head even to his foot, wheresoever the priest looketh, then the priest shall consider, and behold, if the leprosy have covered all his flesh, he shall pronounce him clean that hath the plague. It is all turned white, he is clean. But when raw flesh appeareth in him, he shall be unclean. And
all right, we're going to talk about this once we get to verse 30, but I just want to make it clear that it says if leprosy break out abroad the skin, and it covers the entire skin, and all the skin is covered, it is the plague is still saying that it is leprosy, but he is clean if it covers the entire skin. And if any other flesh starts to show, then he is unclean as long as he is completely covered. That's very interesting. We'll talk on that once we get to verse 30, more on it. All right.
Priest shall see the raw flesh, and pronounce him to be unclean. For the raw flesh is unclean, it is a leprosy. Or if the raw flesh turn again, and be changed unto white, he shall come unto the priest. And the priest shall see him, and behold, if the plague be turned into white, then the priest shall pronounce him clean that hath the plague. He is clean. The flesh also, in which even in the skin thereof was a boil, and is healed. And in the place of the boil there be a white rising, or a bright spot, white and somewhat reddish, and it be shown to the priest. And if, when the priest seeth it, behold, it be in sight lower than the skin, and the hair thereof be turned white, the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is a plague of leprosy broken out of the boil.
So we see here that it can be reddish, like I said, somewhat reddish. So as long as the base of it is white, but it can be a little other colors too. It doesn't mean it has to be some pure white. But a boil, like I said, a rising of the skin, a boil, swelling, like a tumor look, all signs of uncleanliness in the body, which is like real, right? When we think of cancer and stuff like that, that is telling, our body is telling us that we are unclean. We have toxins in our body that is killing us. It's like a warning sign.
But if the priest look on it, and behold, there be no white hairs therein, and if it be not lower than the skin, but be somewhat dark, then the priest shall shut him up 7 days. And if it spread much abroad in the skin, then the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is a plague. But if the bright spot stay in his place, and spread not, it is a burning boil, and the priest shall pronounce him clean. Or if there be any flesh in the skin whereof there is a hot burning, and the quick flesh that burneth have a white bright spot, somewhat reddish or white, then the priest shall look upon it, and behold, if the hair in the bright spot be turned white, and it be in sight deeper than the skin, it is a leprosy broken out of the burning. Wherefore the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is the plague of leprosy. But if the priest look on it, and behold, there be no white hair in the bright spot, and it be no lower than the other skin, but be somewhat dark, then the priest shall shut him up 7 days. And the priest shall look upon him the 7th day, and if it be spread much abroad in the skin, then the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is the plague of leprosy. And if the bright spot stay in his place, and spread not in the skin, but it be somewhat dark, it is a rising of the burning, and the priest shall pronounce him clean. For it is an inflammation of the burning. If a man or woman have a plague upon the head or the beard, then the priest shall see the plague, and behold, if it be in sight deeper than the skin, and there be in it a yellow thin hair, then the priest shall pronounce him unclean. It is a dry scall, even a leprosy upon the head or beard.
All right, let's review before we continue. A lot of stuff going on with leprosy. All right. Yes, I see a few people talking about Miriam, Moses's sister. So leprosy, yes, leprosy is a sign that it can be a sign that we are cursed, like Miriam was in Numbers 12. If you go to Numbers 12, Miriam speaks against Moses and his choice of his wife. And Miriam got cursed with leprosy and was removed from the camp. And it says in Numbers 12, verse 10, that Miriam became leprous, white as snow. And yeah, she was removed from the camp for speaking against Moshe for no reason, or at least above her pay grade. And so yes, leprosy can be a sign of a curse, or it could be a sign in general. Remember when Moshe stuck his hand within his bosom and took it back out, and it was as white as snow. And he told Moshe to go and show the people, right? But so it could be a sign in general, but usually it's a sign of uncleanliness or a curse. So yeah, especially in our times, like I was talking about with tumors and cancerous things, it's something that we're doing to ourselves, showing that our bodies are producing something that is showing that we are unclean through our flesh. All right, now I wanted to cover just in general what we just read through. It gives a criteria, like we said, whitish, it's boiling or bulging, it has white hair, and it is deeper than the flesh, or criterias of leprosy right here in this section at the least. And then we see different descriptions as we read in verse 12 and 13. And we're just going to read them in a Targum just for better description or more description on it. I don't think it adds anything critical, but just wrap our head around it. Yet if the leprosy increaseth in the skin, and the leprosy covereth all the skin of his flesh, from his head even to his feet, in whatever part the eyes of the priest may look on, in deliberating between cleanness and uncleanness, the priest shall consider. And behold, if the leprosy covers all his flesh, the plagued man shall be pronounced to be clean. All of him is turned to whiteness, he is clean. So it tells us that if your body should be melanated, but it is turned completely white, it tells us that that is a form of leprosy, but if it covers your whole body, you are clean. Now, what I'm about to show y'all I'm just matching scripture. I'm not trying to talk down on people that this has happened to, but I keep it real. Everything in scripture matters. And so this brings up that albino or albinism peoples is exactly what the description is. Peoples that the skin of the people are melanated. They are darker complexion, but the entirety of their body from their head to their toe has been turned white. And it's still, I mean, that being said, it's like no disrespect. Is you are clean. It doesn't say that like you're unclean or anything like that. It does say you are clean, but it is what it is. And then I even wanted to give it, and then I will say this. Like I said, I don't mean no disrespect. If anyone watches or you know anyone that has this, but when you read the description of the disabilities that comes with being albino, it comes with disorders that is passed down. We know generational curses are real. And think about it. A disorder that is passed down sounds like a generational curse, does it not? In families where the body makes little or none of the substance called melanin. And then when you go into some of the disabilities, they're pretty crucial. It plays a role in development and function of the eyes. So they don't have the greatest vision. They have vision problems. And then they also have problems being out in the sun due to their skin. Sensitive to the effects of the sun, so they're at a higher risk of getting skin cancer. Like I said, no disrespect, but this does sound like what would be a generational curse. Even though, like I said, it's not like saying you're unclean though, but you could be suffering from a generational curse, but you're still clean. It is what it is. And then I also wanted to bring up verse 29 and 30 to show that a lot of this are scripturally based. When we go to 29 and 30, it says, if a man or woman have a plague upon the head or the beard, then the priest shall see the plague, and behold, if it be in the sight deeper than the skin, there it be in it a yellow thin hair. They have yellow hair. See what I mean? Every characteristic is, I mean, kind of matches. I'm just matching it up. And so you have these like I said, you see right here, this is a young African boy. It's not saying, maybe all Africans are black, but you can tell that this child, most likely his cousins, uncles, etc., even maybe his parents or some of his siblings could be melanated. That this is not a coincidence, right? This is just what is. Simply put it, exactly. And I see that we see that we have I'm gonna mispronounce that word, man. I'm horrible, but there is a certain skin disorders that do start turning your skin white. Very interesting, right? That is very interesting. Like, is that a form of leprosy? Maybe. But all right. Just throwing that out there. But when you're born with disorders that is passed down from families, when we get scriptural, that sounds like a family curse, generational curse, which is 1,000% scriptural. And we see that it matches the description. All right. So that being said, let's move on. We're going to read 31 through 46 now.
Let the priest look on the plague of the skull, and behold, it be not in sight deeper than the skin, and that there is no black hair in it. Then the priest shall shut up him that hath the plague of the skull 7 days. And in the 7th day the priest shall look on the plague, and behold, if the skull spread not, then there be in it no yellow hair, and the skull be not in sight deeper than the skin, he shall be shaven, but the skull shall he not shave, and the priest shall shut up him that hath the skull 7 days more. And in the 7th day the priest shall look on the skull, and behold, if the skull be not spread in the skin, nor be in sight deeper than the skin, then the priest shall pronounce him clean. Then he shall wash his clothes, and be clean. But if the skull spread much in the skin after his cleansing, then the priest shall look on him, and behold, if the skull be spread in the skin, the priest shall not seek for yellow hair, he is unclean. But if the skull be in his sight at a stay, and that there is black hair grown up therein, the skull is healed, he is clean, and the priest shall pronounce him clean. If a man also or a woman have in the skin of their flesh bright spots, even white bright spots, then the priest shall look, and behold, if the bright spots in the skin of their flesh be darkish white, it is a freckled spot that groweth in the skin, he is clean. And the man whose hair is fallen off his head, he is bald, yet is he clean. And he that hath his hair fallen off from the part of his head toward his face, he is forehead bald, yet is he clean.
This part cracked me up. It's like, yo, he's just bald, but he's clean. He can lose hair on his head, but he's bald, but he's clean. Just the way it's said. It just makes, it's just so blunt and straightforward. It cracked me up.
And if there be in the bald head or bald forehead a white reddish sore, it is a leprosy sprung up in his bald head, or his bald forehead. Then the priest shall look upon it, and behold, if the rising of the sore be white, reddish in his bald head, or in his bald forehead, as the leprosy appeareth in the skin of the flesh, he is a leprous man. He is unclean. The priest shall pronounce him utterly unclean. His plague is in his head. And the leper in whom the plague is, his clothes shall be rent, and his head bare. And he shall put a covering upon his upper lip, and shall cry, unclean, unclean. All the days wherein the plague shall be in him, he shall be defiled. He is unclean. He shall dwell alone. Without the camp shall his habitation be.
Okay. We have, I just wanted to review what we're reading. We're reading criteria of leprosy, pretty much white spots. It even says right here, we were talking about like modern day stuff. If you have whitish skin, it says right here, if the bright spots in the skin of their flesh be darkish white, it is a freckle spot that grow up in the skin. He is clean. So man, the details really do matter. Not just any whitish on the body is necessarily unclean or a form of leprosy. But we see over and over again that the priest observes the body, and then if it's the criteria that we've been reading, whitish, boils, lumps, white hair deeper than the skin, they are to be removed and then observed again 7 days. And if it starts to side, if it doesn't spread, if it darkens, then he is clean. If it stays the same, they wait 7 more days and then they observe it again. If it spreads, obviously he's still unclean, and so on. This is like repeated throughout all the different ways of being leprosy or unclean. Is they shut you down out the camp 7 days, and then they check you again and make sure it's not spreading and it's deciding to be clean. And then we'll read, I believe in Leviticus 14 or 15 about that after this, you still have to do sacrifices to come back in the camp and whatnot. But this is just generalizing being clean or unclean right now. Right? You know what? I thought about that. I didn't say it out loud, but since you said it, Liz, I'll say it. It does remind me of pimples. It really does, right? When you have a bulge, it is reddish with white. And what does that mean? That your face is dirty and that you need to pop it, remove it, right? Very interesting. All right. Oh, yeah, I wanted to read verse 46. All the days wherein the plague shall be in him, he shall be defiled. He is unclean. He shall dwell alone without the camp, shall his habitation be. So, verse 46 in the Targum. All the days that the plague is in him, he shall be unclean. For unclean he is. He shall dwell alone by himself. To the side of his wife he must not come nigh. And his habitation shall be without the camp. So the description I read this for obviously was this right here. When it says removed from the camp and by himself, it means by himself. It's like, don't come at your wife and try to touch your wife and so on. They are removed entirely. All right, let's read the rest of the chapter now, 47 through 59. Now we're on the garments. We're about to be reading the garments, leprosy on your garments.
The garment also that the plague of leprosy is in, whether it be a woolen garment or a linen garment, whether it be in the warp or woof of linen or of woolen, whether in a skin or in anything made of skin, and if the plague be greenish or reddish in the garment or in the skin, either in the warp or in the woof or in anything of skin, it is a plague of leprosy, and shall be shown unto the priest.
Okay. I wanted to, so this sounds like some type of mildew, right? Because this is on a garment. This is the same type of mildew or I mean, you know, all the different type of like bad fungi that could be upon your house, which we're going to see in the next chapter, and upon your garment. So I just want to plant that on you, is that's what I think the modern day best interpretation of what we're reading here. Things that are living organisms that are growing upon your garments that can be greenish or reddish on the skin top part of the garment.
Priest shall look upon the plague, and shut up it that hath the plague 7 days. And he shall look on the plague on the 7th day, if the plague be spread in the garment, either in the warp, or in the woof, or in a skin, or in any work that is made of skin, the plague is a fretting leprosy, it is unclean. He shall therefore burn the garment, whether warp or woof, in woolen or in linen, or anything of skin, when the plague is, for it is a fretting leprosy, it shall be burnt in the fire.
So the same protocol. They checked it out. They put it separate for 7 days. And if it spreads, they tell you to burn it. All right. So with anything at your home, your garments, if you're trying to see about getting this weird green mildew off and it ain't coming off, it's because it's unclean and you need to throw it away, burn it. 53.
And if the priest shall look, and behold, the plague be not spread in the garment, either in the warp or in the woof, or anything of skin, then the priest shall command that they wash the thing wherein the plague is, and he shall shut it up 7 days more. And the priest shall look on the plague after that it is washed, and behold, if the plague have not changed his color, and the plague be not spread, it is unclean. Thou shalt burn it in the fire. It is fret inward, whether it be bare within or without. And if the priest look, and behold, the plague be somewhat dark after the washing of it, then he shall rend it out of the garment, or out of the skin, or out of the warp, or out of the woof. And if it appear still in the garment, either in the warp or in the woof, or in anything of skin, it is a spreading plague. Thou shalt burn that wherein the plague is with fire. If the garment either warp or woof, or whatsoever thing of skin it be, which thou shalt wash, if the plague be departed from them, then it shall be washed the second time, and shall be clean. This is the law of the plague of leprosy in a garment of woolen or linen, either in the warp or woof, or anything of skins, to pronounce it clean, or to pronounce it unclean.
Yep, got nothing else to add. I think I said everything. It's the same protocol. Well, obviously, if it's talking about the garments, it tells you to burn it if it isn't after the 7 days. If it isn't looking like it's clean, pretty much just discard it. But you can wash it and make it your own as long as it doesn't spread and you can remove that unclean form of leprosy. Chapter 14, this is the cleansing. So we've broke down the difference between if you got leprosy or you don't, it's just something else. But if you do and you go out the camp and etc., what do you do next? This is what this chapter is about: the laws of cleansing leprosy and coming back into the camp. We're going to read, it's another long chapter, 57 verses. We're going to split it in half. We're going to read 1 through 32 right now.
Leviticus 14. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, This shall be the law of the leper in the day of his cleansing. He shall be brought unto the priest. And the priest shall go forth out of the camp, and the priest shall look, and behold, if the plague of leprosy be healed in the leper, then shall the priest command to take for him that is to be cleansed 2 birds alive and clean, and cedar wood, and scarlet and hyssop. And the priest shall command that one of the birds be killed in an earthen vessel over running water. As for the living bird, he shall take it, and the cedar wood, and the scarlet, and the hyssop, and shall dip them and the living bird in the blood of the bird that was killed over the running water. And he shall sprinkle upon him that is to be cleansed from the leprosy 7 times, and shall pronounce him clean, and shall let the living bird loose into the open field. And he that is to be cleansed shall wash his clothes, and shave off all his hair, and wash himself in water, that he may be clean. And after that he shall come into the camp, and shall tarry abroad out of his tent 7 days. But it shall be on the 7th day that he shall shave all his hair off his head, and his beard, and his eyebrows, even all his hair he shall shave off. And he shall wash his clothes. Also he shall wash his flesh in water, and he shall be clean.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and hop in here and let's read verse 7 and 8 in the Targums from the sprinkling of the blood and the water with the birds. And let him sprinkle upon the face of him who is to be cleansed of the leprosy 7 times, and cleanse him, and send forth the living bird over the face of the field. And it will be that if that man is again to be stricken with leprosy, the living bird will come back to his house on that day. That's interesting. And may be held fit to be eaten. But the bird that had been killed, the priest shall bury in the presence of the leper. And he who is cleansed shall wash his clothes and shave off all his hair, and wash himself in water and be clean. And afterward he may enter the camp, but shall dwell without his tent, the house of his habitation, and come not to the side of his wife for 7 days. So wow. I was talking to my wife beginning of this before the study started about some of this, and it was like you have to be literally in a land of Israelites to be able to conduct all of these properly, because you have to have a camp outside of the camp. And then when you go back into the camp, you really can't even be with your wife or around your wife for even 7 more days. So I don't know what everything looked like, but man, there had to be different quarters for different times. And we'll see the same formatting with women when they're on their cycle. That when they come back into camp, it's the same exact thing. They're not allowed to actually be within the home and doing things after the 7 days of their cycle. And it's just like, man, I don't know how it looked, but we're not in that setup anymore. So it's just very hard to imitate even remotely some of this when everything that's outside your home is more unclean than what's inside your home. It's like, where can you go when everything is unclean, right? Let me see. Oh, yes. And I just also wanted to comment that this sounds like what Job did. Then Job arose and rent his mantle and shaved his head and fell down upon the ground in worship and said, naked come I out of my mother's room, and naked shall I return thither. So yeah, I mean, obviously this is the first chapter when all the curses came upon Job's family, not technically him in a sense of, all the extreme stuff, but Job knew what to do in a sense of humbling himself before the Most High. All right. We're on verse 10.
And on the 8th day he shall take 2 he-lambs without blemish, and 1 ewe-lamb of the first year without blemish, and 3/10 deals of fine flour for a meat offering, mingled with oil, and 1 log of oil. And the priest that maketh him clean shall present the man that is to be made clean, and those things before the Lord, at the door of the tabernacle of the congregation. And the priest shall take 1 he-lamb, and offer him for a trespass offering, and the log of oil, and wave them for a wave offering before the Lord. And he shall slay the lamb in the place where he shall kill the sin offering and the burnt offering in the holy place. For as the sin offering is the priest's, so is the trespass offering. It is most holy. And the priest shall take some of the blood of the trespass offering, and the priest shall put it upon the tip of the right ear of him that is to be cleansed, and upon the thumb of his right hand, and upon the great toe of his right foot. And the priest shall take some of the log of oil, and pour it into the palm of his own left hand. And the priest shall dip his right finger in the oil that is in his left hand, and shall sprinkle of the oil with his finger 7 times before the Lord. And of the rest of the oil that is in his hand shall the priest put upon the tip of the right ear of him that is to be cleansed, and upon the thumb of his right hand, and upon the great toe of his right foot, upon the blood of the trespass offering. And the remnant of the oil that is in the priest's hand he shall pour upon the head of him that is to be cleansed. And the priest shall make an atonement for him before the Lord. And the priest shall offer the sin offering, and make an atonement for him that is to be cleansed from his uncleanness. And afterward he shall kill the burnt offering. And the priest shall offer the burnt offering and the meat offering upon the altar. And the priest shall make an atonement for him, and he shall be clean. And if he be poor, and cannot get so much, then he shall take 1 lamb for a trespass offering to be waved, to make an atonement for him, and 1/10 deal of fine flour mingled with oil for a meat offering, and a log of oil, and 2 turtle doves, or 2 young pigeons, such as he is able to get, and the one shall be a sin offering, and the other a burnt offering. And he shall bring them on the 8th day for his cleansing unto the priest, unto the door of the tabernacle of the congregation before the Lord. And the priest shall take the lamb of the trespass offering, and the log of oil, and the priest shall wave them for a wave offering before the Lord. And he shall kill the lamb of the trespass offering, and the priest shall take some of the blood of the trespass offering, and put it upon the tip of the right ear of him that is to be cleansed, and upon the thumb of his right hand, and upon the great toe of his right foot. And the priest shall pour of the oil into the palm of his own left hand, And the priest shall sprinkle with his right finger some of the oil that is in his left hand 7 times before the Lord. And the priest shall put of the oil that is in his hand upon the tip of the right ear of him that is to be cleansed, and upon the thumb of his right hand, and upon the great toe of his right foot, upon the place of the blood of the trespass offering. And the rest of the oil that is in the priest's hand he shall put upon the head of him that is to be cleansed, to make an atonement for him before the Lord. And he shall offer the one of the turtle doves, or of the young pigeons, such as he can get, even such as he is able to get, the one for a sin offering, and the other for a burnt offering with the meat offering. And the priest shall make an atonement for him that is to be cleansed before the Lord. This is the law of him in whom is the plague of leprosy, whose hand is not able to get that which pertaineth to his cleansing. And the Lord spake.
Okay, just review. It's a lot, so I just want to review, make sure we're gathering understanding here. The cleansing of leprosy, we see that the priest has to go out the camp with the birds in the beginning, what we read here, to just give the initial sacrifice of the birds for them to come in back in the camp. And then the person that had the leprosy has to go and make a sacrifice. And then, like we said that earlier, that it has to wait 7 days even prior to that. And let me see, we'll make sure. Then we just have the trespass and burnt offerings and whatnot to become whole again. And then we have over and over again, we talked about it when it talks on the right ear, the end of the right ear, the right finger. It's at the bottom, we just got done reading it. It says, the priest shall put the oil that is in his hand upon the tip of the right ear of him that is to be cleansed, upon the thumb of his right hand. The Targum actually says middle finger. Take that what you will, but it's the only source that says that. So the thumb of his right hand and upon the great toe of his right foot. These are all symbols of listening, being obedient, and walking in the way. The entire point of you being cleansed is to now do those things. And because majority of what we're comprehending is that if you have a form of leprosy, it could have been prevented. Most of the time in scripture, it is a curse of some sort that could be prevented. And let me say this real quick. I know, yeah, I see the chat rolling, and they're like, "Well, what about this? What about that?" Hey, y'all, y'all gotta understand that just because you may be unclean, it doesn't mean that you're in sin. All right, there is sacrifices that they come out of in a lot of different ways as we're reading throughout this Torah portion, but there is nowhere that it says that you have sinned. So yes, to be like cleansed and renewed, you need to be covered in a whole new blood. But we have that eternally now. So especially speaking for us now that we don't do sacrifices, and we will always be covered from our trespasses to our sin offerings, that doesn't mean you're sinning. Unclean doesn't mean you're sinning. All right. A lot of these are there's a lot of things that just says wash yourself with water and you'll be unclean till evening. It's only childbirth, women's cycle, and leprosy. Forms of leprosy is when you actually have to go do a sacrifice. But there's a lot of general uncleanliness that it says that you just got to wash yourself and you'll be clean again at evening. So I just want to make sure y'all know that. Some of y'all sound a little bit like, oh my gosh, guys, you're not in sin. As long as you're not doing certain things, and that's the whole point of this Torah portion, is to put it in perspective for what we're doing now. Just because you're unclean, you technically didn't do anything wrong. And like women's cycle is a uncleanliness that is not something that you can't avoid. The more of the uncleanliness that we are talking about avoiding is like having clean boils and tumors coming from your skin, which your body is telling itself that it's unclean. Those are the type of uncleanliness that we're talking about that is more important. The ones that are avoidable. Not if you had to pick up your dead dog, not if you're on your cycle, not if you had a baby. Those are not the ones that you need to be heightened and stressed about. Yes, we need to be educated and to make sure we're not doing things that we shouldn't be doing at certain times. But let's not get it twisted. You're not doing anything wrong. All right, let's continue. Right, where are we at? 33 through 57. Now, this is talking about our homes having, like, I want to say some type of bad fungi mildew is what my description would be, that is growing upon the houses for my interpretation at the least. All right, 33. Yeah.
Spake unto Moses and unto Aaron, saying, when ye be come into the land of Canaan, which I give to you for a possession, and I put the plague of leprosy in a house of the land of your possession, and he that owneth the house shall come and tell the priest, saying, it seemeth to me there is as it were a plague in the house. Then the priest shall command that they empty the house before the priest go into it to see the plague, that all that is in the house be not made unclean. And afterward the priest shall go in to see the house. And he shall look on the plague, and behold, if the plague be in the walls of the house with hollow strakes, greenish or reddish, which in sight are lower than the wall, then the priest shall go out of the house to the door of the house, and shut up the house 7 days. And the priest shall come again the 7th day, and shall look, and behold, if the plague be spread in the walls of the house, then the priest shall command that they take away the stones in which the plague is, and they shall cast them into an unclean place without the city. And he shall cause the house to be scraped within round about, and they shall pour out the dust that they scrape off without the city into an unclean place. And they shall take other stones, and put them in the place of those stones. And he shall take other mortar, and shall plaster the house. And if the plague come again and break out in the house, after that he hath taken away the stones, and after he hath scraped the house, and after it is plastered, then the priest shall come and look, and behold, if the plague be spread in the house, it is a fretting leprosy in the house, it is unclean. And he shall break down the house, the stones of it, and the timber thereof, and all the mortar of the house, and he shall carry them forth out of the city into an unclean place. Moreover, he that goeth into the house all the while that it is shut up shall be unclean until the even. And he that...
All right, I want to just review it as we go on. It says, they removed, it were like, if you have a form of leprosy, they see where it's at. You can literally like remove it, cut it out your house, depending on what your house is built of, replace it, and then come back. And if it ends up growing still, then the house is plagued. In other words, that we're get more in detail, and it's unclean. And it says that he shall break down the house and the stones of it. So wow, like the whole house is cursed, plagued. And like we said, like he's showing us this for a reason. So if there is something like this, maybe he's telling you need to get out, right? You don't want to be here. This home is cursed.
that lieth in the house shall wash his clothes, and he that eateth in the house shall wash his clothes. And if the priest shall come in and look upon it, and behold, the plague hath not spread in the house, after the house was plastered, then the priest shall pronounce the house clean, because the plague is healed. And he shall take to cleanse the house 2 birds, and cedar wood, and scarlet, and hyssop. And he shall kill the one of the birds in an earthen vessel over running water. And he shall take the cedar wood, and the hyssop, and the scarlet, and the living bird, and dip them in the blood of the slain bird, and in the running water, and sprinkle the house 7 times. And he shall cleanse the house with the blood of the bird, and with the running water, and with the living bird, and with the cedar wood, and with the hyssop, and with the scarlet. But he shall let go the living bird out of the city into the open fields, and make an atonement for the house, and it shall be clean. This is the law for all manner of plague of leprosy and scald, and for the leprosy of a garment and of a house, and for a rising, and for a scab, and for a bright spot, to teach when it is unclean, and when it is clean. This is the law of leprosy.
So we see that, it tells you that you can remove a part of the house, replace it, plaster it, and if it goes away, cool, but there's still always a cleansing and a sacrifice to come back from leprosy. That's the consistent matter. Like they could be dealt differently, different matters of leprosy or uncleanliness, but every single one to get back inside the righteous camp, you need to be cleansed and you need an atonement. And now in our last chapter of this Torah portion, we are on personal cleanliness, bodily discharges from man or woman. Oh, real quick, I did wanted to read 53 through 57, chapter 14 in the Targums. And the living bird he shall send forth out of the town upon the face of the field, and he shall atone for the house. You see that? Atone, still. And it shall be clean. But if it is to be that the house will be again struck with leprosy, the bird on that day will return. It may be fit for food. We see that, at least in the Targums, that's consistent with the man and the house. But the bird that was killed shall the priest bury in the presence of the owner of the house. This is the decree of instructions in the Torah for every plague of leprosy. And then it gives a score butis, and for leprosy in apparel and in a house, so like scab, scorn, bulges, leprosy of garments, apparel in the house. So covered all of that. And then other descriptions for tumors, scars, inflamed blotches. So all of these is what I'm saying, put kind of on a modern day interpretation, like any type of bad bulging tumor, etc. That the priest may teach the people to discern between the day of darkness in which they may not be able to see the plague, and the day of light, and between a man who is unclean and a man who is clean. This shall be a decree of instructions for the leprosy. So that's leprosy, and now we're getting into a slight, still on clean and unclean, but done with leprosy. Chapter 15.
Leviticus 15. And the Lord spake unto Moses and to Aaron, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them, When any man hath a running issue out of his flesh, because of his issue, he is unclean.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and just stop while we're here. This is where I was talking about. It says, when any man has running issue out of his flesh. We're going to the Brenton Septuagint translation. Same chapter, same verse, Leviticus 15, it's verse 3, not 2, excuse me. It's verse 3. It's not the same chapter. So hold on, I'm gonna let verse 3 read.
And this shall be his uncleanness in his issue, whether his flesh run with his issue, or his flesh be stopped from his issue, it is his uncleanness. Every bet.
All right, so running issue out of his flesh, whether his flesh run with his issue or his flesh be stopped from his issue. It's talking about pretty much a discharge. And then back to the Septuagint in verse 3 now. And this is the law of his uncleanness, whether whoever has gonorrhea out of his body, this is his uncleanliness. Like that could have been just what the translator scribe interpretation was, but I agree it coincides with modern day bad discharges, and just like we were talking about with the bulging of the skin, it makes sense by reason of the issue by which his body is affected through the issue, all the days of the issue of his body by which his body is affected through the issue, there is his uncleanliness. All right, so that is that. That was the Septuagint, Leviticus 15, verse 3. And I actually wanted to read verse 2 here. Speak with the sons of Yasharallah and say to them, a man, whether young or old, who has defluxion from his flesh, when he has seen it 3 times, is unclean. And that was the main point of me bringing this up. This says 3 times, I guess, to verify that it wasn't just something random, that if it's a consistent issue, then it is what you think it is kind of what I get from that. All right, let's continue.
Head whereon he lieth that hath the issue is unclean, and everything whereon he sitteth shall be unclean. And whosoever toucheth his bed shall wash his clothes, and bathe himself in water, and be unclean until the even. And he that sitteth on anything whereon he sat that hath the issue shall wash his clothes, and bathe himself in water, and be unclean until the even. And he that toucheth the flesh of him that hath the issue shall wash his clothes, and bathe himself in water, and be unclean until the even. And if he that hath the issue spit upon him that is clean, then he shall wash his clothes, and bathe himself in water, and be unclean until the even. And what saddle soever he rideth upon that hath the issue shall be unclean. And whosoever toucheth anything that was under him shall be unclean until the even. And he that beareth any of those things shall wash his clothes, and bathe himself in water, and be unclean until the even. And whomsoever he toucheth that hath the issue, and hath not rinsed his hands in water, he shall wash his clothes, and bathe himself in water, and be unclean until the even. And the vessel of earth that he toucheth, which hath the issue, shall be broken, and every vessel of wood shall be rinsed in water. And when he that hath an issue is cleansed of his issue, then he shall number to himself 7 days for his cleansing, and wash his clothes, and bathe his flesh in running water, and shall be clean. And on the 8th day he shall take to him 2 turtle doves, or 2 young pigeons, and come before the Lord unto the door of the tabernacle of the congregation, and give them unto the priest. And the priest shall offer them, the one for a sin offering, and the other for a burnt offering. And the priest shall make an atonement for him before the Lord for his issue. And if any man's seed of copulation go out from him, then he shall wash all his flesh in water, and be unclean until the even. And every garment and every skin whereon is the seed of copulation shall be washed with water, and be unclean until the even.
All right. I meant to stop after verse 15 to just separate the two. So verse 1 through 15 is talking about, like I said, maybe gonorrhea or a STD or something like that is causing you to have unwanted bodily fluids that are leaking from the flesh of some sort. That's 1 through 15. So verse 16 goes on to a different matter. They call it the seed of copulation. Let me see in the ES. Well, they just straight up call it emission of semen. So pretty much, yeah. So totally different matters here. 1 through 15 is more talking about something bad discharge. This is a normal man's discharge of semen. Okay, so these are two different matters. So I just wanted to separate the two. But we see that a man's discharge of semen is unclean, right?
Also, with whom man shall lie with seed of copulation, they shall both bathe themselves in water and be unclean until the even. And if a woman have an issue, and her issue in her flesh be blood, she shall be put apart 7 days, and whosoever toucheth her shall be unclean until the even.
All right, so this is, if you on my Instagram, which most of you are, yes, this is why I put on my Sabbath instructions that no sex, because sex is an unclean act. As we read right here, from the man to the woman, both are unclean when he lies with his wife. And we see this throughout scripture. In Deuteronomy 23, 10, 11, if there be among you any man that is not clean by the reason of uncleanness that chances him by night. Oh, I start off with this because just for the details. Someone asked me, I looked into it, and sure enough, what did I say earlier? It's different when you have a period. If a woman's on her cycle, she can't control that, but we can control having sex or not having sex. And if sex is an unclean act, and we're about to be on a holy day, a Kodesh day like the Sabbath or any of the Moedims, the annual feast, that you shouldn't, like, we can control it. So why would I make myself unclean in an act that I can control on a Kodesh day? That would be like a trespassing on what is holy, right? And we're about to put all of this into a full understanding at the end of this chapter. But right now we're just looking like, so Deuteronomy 23, 10, and 11 is pointing out that if you're going to have, you can't have sex with your wife the day before. If it's in the night, the evening before the day, that will make you unclean all the way through the following day, as it reads now. And if there be among you any man that is not clean by reason of uncleanness that chances him by night, then shall he go abroad out of the camp. He shall not come within the camp, but he shall be within. Evening cometh on, he shall wash himself with water, and when the sun is down, he shall come into the camp again. So yes, you don't want to go outside the camp when you have a choice, I mean, even though, like I said, we're doing the best of our abilities, when we have a choice. So if it's a Kodesh day coming, you can't do that the night before, or you can't even do it on the day of, obviously. And I really don't think the Most High is telling you, like, we should be having sex on the Sabbath. Like, I mean, that we should be doing a bunch of other things, right? But he does tell you to bathe yourself, just for people that needs a cleaning criteria. If you have sex, wash yourself off with water. And Kenneth, what it just said before we even get to that, this is before he even had it talked about sex. It didn't even say sex generally. Before that, it says if a man seed of semen go out from him. So it could be a wet dream. It could be anything. If it goes out of you, you're unclean until evening. So that's pretty straightforward. Gonna add or take away to that. And if you're asking about trying to do other forms of sex on a holy day or Sabbath, check why you're here. Okay, I'm not poking at you, but I don't know any other form that's not going to get any bodily fluids not out and about. It just happens, kind of. So I'm just going to leave it at that. Don't try to thread the line and figure out how and when you can do it. Have some self-control. Don't do it before a holy event, because you can control yourself, and don't do it on the days. Any other thing doesn't really matter. Okay, so yeah, let's go back to verses here. So this is talking about, so just clarifying that, and then just showing precepts of people staying away from their woman, aka sex, before doing something that is Kodesh. We see when David went to the priest to ask for the food, and the priest was like, well, this is only for us, so the only way I will even allow you to touch it is if you are clean. And David answers the priest and said unto him, of truth, women have been kept from us about these 3 days since I came out, and the vessel of the young men are holy. And then they were able to get the bread from the tabernacle, because that bread is sanctified bread, it's holy bread. So if you are with women and it's you're unclean. And then we see the same pattern in Exodus 19:15. And he said unto the people, be ready against the third day, come not at your wives, saying, stay away from your wives. Okay, so we see that and that's why we should imitate that, since we have control. We've seen a lot of things that are kind of like hard to imitate. This is not hard to imitate. Staying away from your wives, men, before a Kodesh holy event, such as Sabbaths and feast days. And we also see that Messiah in the womb, who he was in of Mary, stayed clean, and he was never unclean in the womb, because obviously she was a virgin, so she was never unclean. And Joseph knew her not till she brought forth her firstborn son. So no sex, and she was a virgin throughout the entire time. So Mary was a clean vessel for our Messiah throughout her pregnancy. All right. Let's finish off the rest of this chapter and close off Torah portion 23.
Everything that she lieth upon in her separation shall be unclean.
Okay. So just saying it. Now we're on a woman's cycle. That's what we're on right now, from 19 to the rest of this chapter.
Thing also that she sitteth upon shall be unclean. And whosoever toucheth her bed shall wash his clothes, and bathe himself in water, and be unclean until the even. And whosoever toucheth anything that she sat upon shall wash his clothes, and bathe himself in water, and be unclean until the even. And if it be on her bed, or on anything whereon she sitteth, when he toucheth it, he shall be unclean until the even. And if any man lie with her at all, and her flowers be upon him, he shall be unclean 7 days.
All right, so we see that right there. If he touches or anything, you're just unclean until evening. But and it should be accidental, by the way, this shouldn't be on purpose. But if you accidentally, which can happen, you sleep with your wife and you're like, oh snap, I started my period. That person's not just unclean till the end of the day, he's unclean 7 days. So there's levels to this. We see all throughout these clean and unclean portion that there's levels, there's order of everything. So that is worse, obviously, to have sex when a woman is on her cycle. That's a no-no.
And all the bed whereon he lieth shall be unclean. And if a woman have an issue of her blood many days out of the time of her separation, or if it run beyond the time of her separation, all the days of the issue of her uncleanness shall be as the days of her separation. she shall be unclean. Every bed whereon she lieth all the days of her issue shall be unto her as the bed of her separation. And whatsoever she sitteth upon shall be unclean, as the uncleanness of her separation. And whosoever toucheth those things shall be unclean, and shall wash his clothes, and bathe himself in water, and be unclean until the even. But if she be cleansed of her issue, then she shall number to herself 7 days, and after that she shall be clean. And on the 8th day she shall take unto her 2 turtles, or 2 young pigeons, and bring them unto the priest, to the door of the tabernacle of the congregation.
And let me clarify here too. Everyone focuses on the 7 days, or if it said if it's more, then it's more days. If she's on her cycle for more than 7, then it is what it is. Even after that, it's 7 more days. But if she be cleansed of her issue, then she shall number herself 7 days. And after that, she shall be clean. So we're not talking about 7 days. We're talking about a minimum of 14 every month. Imagine how that was back in the day. Put that in perspective. Let's finish.
And the priest shall offer the one for a sin offering, and the other for a burnt offering. And the priest shall make an atonement for her before the Lord for the issue of her uncleanness. Thus shall ye separate the children of Israel from their uncleanness, that they die not in their uncleanness, when they defile my tabernacle that is among them. This is the law of him that hath an issue, and of him whose seed goeth from him, and is defiled therewith, and of her that is sick of her flowers, and of him that hath an issue, of the man, and of the woman, and of him that lieth with her, that is unclean.
All right, let's go to the Targums real quick. We're going to read chapter 15, verse 31 through 33. So shall you separate the children of Yasharallah. Listen up, because we're about to wrap it up, and I'm gonna just give my final perspective on how do we deal with all of this in our time, okay? So shall you separate the children of Yasharallah from their uncleanliness, and make them to be separate from their wives at the time of their seclusion, and to give not occasion that they die for their uncleanliness in defiling my tabernacle, where the glory of my Shekinah dwelleth among them. This is the decree of instructions for him who have a deflection, and for him whose seed goeth forth and defiles him, and for her who is unclean in the time of her separation, and for anyone who has an issue, whether male or female, and for a man who lieth with the unclean. All these shall be advised of their uncleanness, and when purified shall bring the oblations that make atonement for them. All right, so we see that all of them has an atonement, but we now know that our atonement, we have an everlasting atonement for all of it, right? So we now know in our time the atonement part has been fulfilled. So then we get to the clean and uncleanliness. Okay, so at the end of our unclean days, and we're clean, we don't have to make sacrifices. We can give thanks for that already and give our sacrifice through praise and obedience. But then we get all of the protocol when we've been reading throughout this Torah portion about going out the camp, going in the camp. Then when you could go back in the camp, you can't even go back in your home because you got to be separated because you're still unclean. And I'm gonna just cut it straight to y'all. The fact that anything that someone can touch, if they don't wash their hands properly or forget to wash their hands, or they sit on, and this is, guys, this is, most of this stuff is up to 7 days to 14 days long. A lot of people, I see a lot of people say, oh, well, I don't sleep in the same bed for the week. Guys, it's more than a week. It's 14 days, minimum. And so just want to point that out. I see people say that, but it's just like, well, all I'm saying is that if you're going to do it, then do it all the way, right? But at the end of the day, I'm going to read some scripture and I'm going to point out my perspective on the matter. So let's go to Numbers 9, 6 through 10. I'm going to use the story of Passover. The whole point of this to have two different Passovers. If you don't know, we have the annual Passover that is a set date. That's on the 14th at evening on the first month. But then we have a story in Numbers that prevents many people from keeping the Passover because Passover is a Kodesh event that you have to be holy to partake of the lamb. So if you're not holy, then he gives a second opportunity. So let's read this as an example for the whole point that I'm about to be making. And there were certain men who were defiled by the dead body of a man. We read that in the beginning of this Torah portion, that you will be unclean if you touch a dead corpse, that they could not keep the Passover on that day. And they came before Moses and before Aaron on that day. And those men said unto him, we are defiled by the dead body of a man. Wherefore are we kept back, that we may not offer an offering to Ahiah in his appointed season among the children of Yasharallah? And Moshe said unto them, stand still, and I will hear what Ahiah will command concerning you. And Ahiah spoke to Moses, saying, speak unto the children of Israel, saying, if any man of you or of your prosperity shall be unclean by reason of a dead body, or be in a journey far off, and the Targums even add or leprosy. So take that what you will. Yet he shall keep the Passover unto Ahiah. And just like I said, I stopped it there, but it goes on to tell you that you're just going to keep it in the second month. And so just be ready in the second month to keep it, because you can't keep it in the first month. Because why? Because why? He is unclean and he can't bring forth sacrifices at the tabernacle. And we see this as a precept, Leviticus 5, that we just was talking about, touch a carcass of an unclean beast, or just a carcass in general can make you unclean. But like I said, just a dead body in general will make you not permittable to do the eat of the Passover meal. As we read put together in other Torah portions, that it's pretty much a Leviticus meal for his priest, and it's the equivalent of a priest being unclean in the tabernacle. That's not authorized. So you can't partake in something that is holy in Kodesh, that resembles a sacrifice that happens inside the tabernacle as the priests consume it, if you're not supposed to be in the tabernacle at all. As we read in Numbers 19:13. And whosoever and whosoever touches the dead body of any man, oh, that's just another precept there. Right here, the point, I see why I put this here. So this is a precept saying whoever touched the dead body and purify not himself defiles the tabernacle and shall be cut off. Let's remember that. This is very important. And then we see the same thing we just read in Leviticus 15:31. What becomes a sin when you're unclean? Thus shall ye separate the children of Israel from their uncleanliness, that they die not in their uncleanness when they defile my tabernacle that is among them. And then I can even add from earlier, Leviticus 12:4, I believe, says the same thing. All of the acts of uncleanliness, you're being removed outside of the camp, because within the camp is the tabernacle. In 12:4, which we read earlier, when she then continues in the blood of her purifying 33 days, she shall touch no holy, hallowed thing, Kodesh thing, nor come into the sanctuary or tabernacle until the days of her purifying be fulfilled. So the entire point that I'm making is that when he's talking about removing you from the camp, is because within the camp or Kodesh, the sanctuary, the tabernacles, the altar, etc. There's even people that are Kodesh, that are sanctified, priests, and people that are going to go to the tabernacle to give sacrifices. So in their time, you had to remove yourself, or you would spread the uncleanliness to people that would have to go to the tabernacle, either priests or even individuals, common people that had to bring forth sacrifices for whatever situation they're in, feast days, appointed times, new moons, Shabbats, or sin offerings in general. Trespass offerings, or even a free will offering. If you even try to give a free will offering and you are unclean, you have trespassed against the tabernacle. So the entire point of what I'm saying is that the time we're in, we don't have outward tabernacles and Kodesh things. There's nothing inside that's outside our homes that is Kodesh in Babylon. Mystery Babylon is the world that is surrounding us, and it's actually cursed. Everything around us is cursed. If anything, the most Kodesh things is probably within our homes. So my point is, if we don't have a tabernacle to defile, and we can't defile somebody that is going to the tabernacle, which is why you had to be removed, and we don't have to make sacrifices because we have eternal atonement, then simply put, if I sit on the couch with my wife when she's on her cycle, which makes me unclean, what is that stopping me from doing? Nothing. I'm not going to touch a priest that's going to the tabernacle to make sacrifices to make him unclean, because we don't have a priesthood anymore that is of the flesh. We have the Melchizedek eternal priesthood of Messiah. I have no tabernacle to make sacrifices, so I can't sin in that way, which is the whole point of what I was showing you from Numbers to Leviticus. It tells us the entire point of being removed from the camp is to not touch the tabernacle or something or someone that is Kodesh, that doesn't exist anymore. So my point is, yes, we can be unclean if I sit on the couch with my wife that is on her period, and I'm unclean until evening. But what did I do to be in sin? Being unclean until evening and washing myself off is not sin. It's telling me that I need to not touch anything that is Kodesh. So my point is, that's why I said earlier, guys, just because you're unclean doesn't mean you're in sin. It actually doesn't mean that at all. Well, leprosy and some stuff is more, like I said, there's levels. There's levels. I'm talking about the things that, like, I'm not going to have sex with my wife, but because, like I said, I'm unclean for 7 days if I do that. That's different. And I don't want to have sex on a Kodesh event. That's different. I feel like that is trespassing on what is holy. But something as simple as sitting on a couch with my wife when she's on her cycle or whatever, the only way for me to sin would be to touch something that is Kodesh, as I just read in scripture. So take that what you will, and that's just my interpretation of how I live with it. I'm not going to drive myself crazy because we don't have a place outside the camp. You talking about putting a tent outside and living in a tent? Go ahead. It's 100. It will be 106 degrees today in Texas. Go out and stay in a tent for 2 weeks. Tell your wife to go out in a tent for 2 weeks, or just be unclean until evening. Take it what you will, but Shabbat Shalom. And thank y'all for joining me. We'll be starting on Leviticus chapter 16 next week. And I pray this gives you some wisdom and some guidance. Shalom and Amen.